Hi, my name is Matt Cade, and in this series of 10 videos we're going to be looking at some of the processes in which I record drums. So the aim of these videos is to give an insight into some of the processes that I've learned and some of the techniques that I've been using for the last 10 years. So the song that we're recording today is a pop punk song. It's for a local band called Not Tonight and Headaches, and the song is called Employee of the Week. The room that we're in is a typical sort of classroom really. It's not a traditional studio, so we're not using any drum room microphones or anything like that. We're just focusing on close mics. So normally I'm used to recording on location. I'll often travel to bands' rehearsal spots or practice rooms, and I'll set up a kind of a guerrilla recording setup with my own equipment. Today we're doing it in this sort of converted office space, which is used as a recording studio, but it's not a traditional studio in terms of a big sort of produced live room. It is more of an office space. We're going to be using Pro Tools to record as our main DAW, and we're using Universal Audio Apollo interfaces, which gives us the option of affecting the sounds with EQ and preamp sort of simulations on the way into Pro Tools as well. The reason that we're using the Universal Apollo interface is because it has got that classic analog workflow to it, so we can go through classic style Neve preamps or API style preamps, and that will give us a little bit more authenticity to the sound when recording in a fully digital format. The microphones are all set up in the live room, and we're now in the control room, so I'm just going to show you the equipment that we are using to get our results today. So this first piece of equipment is it's called the Audient ASP800, and this links to the Universal Audio Apollo via ADAT cable. So we're using an optical cable using the ADAT in. That allows us to have another 8 inputs going into the Apollo. So the Apollo, the standard, has got 4 on this particular model, and then we've got another 8, so we're using 10 mics in total on the drums, and then I'm using another one for a talkback mic in here, which I'll explain in a second. So we've got 12 in total, which is more than enough for what we're doing today. So as I've mentioned already, this interface is a Universal Audio Apollo. This is actually quite an older model now. It's probably getting on for 10 years old, but for my needs and for what I do, it still works great. It's solid. It's on Thunderbolt 2, which goes straight to my MacBook, and I've never had an issue with it, so I'm quite happy to keep using it for as long as I can. The Universal Audio format for recording works great. As I say, it has that analog kind of feel, so we go through a separate piece of software before we get to Pro Tools, which I will explain in the next video as well. So the interface is connected directly to these Genelec 8030A speakers, and the laptop I'm using is a MacBook Pro from 2017. I went for the older spec purely because it still had the ports on that I would need for this particular interface. So as I said, I'm using Thunderbolt 2, but it's great spec for the year, and it's still working great. And finally, the software I'm using is Pro Tools. It's been my DAW of choice for the last 15 years. It's what I've learned on, and it's what I'm comfortable using. There's so many shortcuts and techniques that you can do in there that you just can't do as easily, or as easily for me, on other software. So for me, it's always Pro Tools. As well as Pro Tools, sometimes I do use Logic Pro, which is Apple's version of a DAW. It's a lot cheaper to buy than Pro Tools, but other than that, if you're interested in getting into this kind of thing, you can use software such as Reaper, which you can get on a trial basis, and then even if you do end up buying the full version, it's not a lot of money. I think it's less than £100. There's also classics like GarageBand that come free on an Apple machine. There's also software like Ableton, which is more DJ based and electronic music based. And there are still a few studios that will use tape machines, but obviously tape is in a shorter supply now to what it used to be. So for ease of use and for anyone new getting into it, it's quite amazing what you can do with a standard laptop, small interface. I mean, obviously smaller than what we're using here today, but you can get started with a lot less equipment these days. So the drum setup that we're using is typical of what I would use for a drum recording setup. It's something I've seen from industry in the past, as well as from experience. So that's down to the types of mics that I'm using. It's been trial and error for quite a few years for myself, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and what I like and what the client ultimately likes as well. With the industry turning mostly digital for recording studios, it makes sense that we're doing it this way. Rather than using outboard preamps and outboard compression or equalizers, anything like that, I'm keen to stick with fully digital formats, which is another reason I'm using the universal audio equipment. Hopefully these videos are going to be useful and informative for you. In the next video we're going to be looking at some of the drum sizes, the shell types, and just some more of the stuff that we've got going on in that respect.